Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to bring this video which I'm really excited for because it is a topic that I've been meaning to talk to you guys about for a long time. In this video, I'm gonna go over some best practices that you can follow whenever you're writing code using React hooks. Now, hooks is a very powerful tool that React offers to us, but there are a couple stuff that you do have to keep in mind whenever using them in order to keep your code more maintainable and optimized. So with that in mind, let's get into the video. So the first thing I really want to talk about is the actual rules that React and the React team imposed for whenever you want to use hooks. Now, there's 3 specific rules that you always have to follow, and simply not following them already is an anti-pattern. So I just wanted to quickly mention them so you guys can understand it since the beginning. So the first rule is that you can only call hooks at the top level of a React functional component, meaning that you can't call hooks inside of like if statements or functions or loops or whatever. It's only inside of the top level of a React functional component. Now, the second thing kind of takes what I just said and explains a little bit more. Now, why did I specify React functional components? Well, because you can't actually write hooks or include hooks in other types of functions. So that means that by default, you can't use hooks in normal JavaScript functions or something like a class component in React. Finally, the third thing is more of a convention, but it actually is really important as well, which is whenever you're going to create your own hook, it is important to always name it starting with the word use. So that's why like all the hooks have a name like use effect, use state, use memo, because they had to create a default naming structure for hooks in order to differentiate them from normal components and normal functions. So it is important to keep that in mind because it is one of the 3 rules that React imposes. Now, these are pretty easy to follow. However, it is a best practice if you really want to really enforce this to install an ESLint checker, which basically will check if you're actually following these rules, and it will alert you whenever you break one of them. So the second thing I really want to talk about in this video is the idea of over-optimizing your React components. Now, I'm more specifically talking about whenever developers who are learning React, many of them are beginners, start learning about hooks such as the use memo hook, or the use callback hook, and they see the benefits from using those hooks because it is served to optimize your application. However, they decide that it is best to actually put it everywhere in their app, which is not a good idea. For example, the use callback hook is really cool because whenever you have a function that is passed in as props to another component, this function will be recreated every time its parent component is re-rendered, right? Which means that by default, what will happen is every time the component re-renders, the function will be recreated. And since it's being passed as props to a child component, it will basically trigger a re-render of that child component unnecessarily. So with the use callback hook, you basically tell React that even though this is being recreated, you want to maintain because there wasn't any changes in the function. So it will basically not re-render the child component unnecessarily, which, as you might expect, just improves performance in the long run. But because devs who are learning React see the benefit of using a use callback, they might just get into the habit of putting it in every single function, which is something that I honestly think is really unnecessary and shouldn't be done. I consider it 100% best practice to actually know whenever you have to use your hooks instead of just putting them everywhere in your app. Same thing goes with the use memo. Now you might ask, okay, is there any problem with just using it? Like, it might not be benefiting your app, but is it actually harming your app? Well, I would argue that it is, because first, it means nothing to improve your performance if it is not the correct use case. Second of all, when you use the use callback hook, for example, it invokes a new function and a new dependency array. So I know that's minimal, but it's just adding more unnecessarily to your app. And third, it makes your code messy. Like, if React really wanted it to be so that you use the use callback hook on every function or a use memo hook on every variable, then there wouldn't be an option to not do so. So putting those hooks and using it in unnecessary situations just make your code more messy, more unmaintainable, and overall it just shows that you don't know when to use the hook. Okay, so now the third one is one of the things I really wanted to talk about most, because it is a hot topic that a lot of people debate on, which is when exactly should you use and create a custom hook? Well, this is a tricky one because everyone is different, and I would technically argue that whatever you find that works best for you would be the correct answer, especially because the React dev team never gave a concrete answer on this kind of situations. However, I would indeed consider the way I do it to be best practice because it's the way that I've seen being done in other tech companies by other people who I know write good code. And also it's the way that I found the best for me to maintain my code, which is to basically put custom hooks almost everywhere. Hooks are very powerful, and it can encapsulate a really complicated logic into a simple to use function, which can basically modify the state of a component. So in almost every kind of situation, it is good, in my opinion, to actually create a hook. For example, if I'm communicating with an API, either to fetch data or modify data or anything like that, I will create a custom hook for that. If I want to call a bunch of functions whenever I click a button, or execute some sort of function whenever an input is changed, or something like that, that is going to make my code unorganized if put inside of the same component, I will always separate them into different hooks. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, I like my components to be actually pretty simple, in the sense that if I have a component and it has some UI, I want it to just basically just display the UI. Now, obviously, the UI includes functionality, and those functionalities are implemented through functions and state calls and all of that. So what I do is I separate the logic from the UI. The logic will exist in individual hooks that I create, and the UI will exist inside of the return statement in my functional component. This way, it makes my components way easier to read, in my opinion, and also it becomes way more testable, because if you have a component where there is a lot of different pieces of logic that are not related to each other, it is hard to test each logic independently without having the influence of the other logic or without having the influence of the other tests. So being able to test your own custom hook separated from the test from your component is actually really good. I know a lot of beginners might find it hard to understand use cases for this, but I'm gonna give you guys a very simple example I actually found online, which I think a lot of beginners might understand because it is very simple. Imagine a component where you have a couple buttons, right? And a couple inputs, right? The logic for the buttons and the inputs might not be actually related to each other. The buttons might be communicating with an API, and the inputs might be doing something related to something else, like either communicating with another API, or I don't know, in our example, it is changing the text in the screen. So those two things are not related to each other. So normally, if you're not using custom hooks, what you would do is you would create all of the states that are needed in this case, and you would write all of the functions that are needed in this case, all inside of the same component, and just pass those functions and states to wherever they need to be passed on. However, if you really want to optimize and use hooks to your advantage, you would actually create two different hooks in this case and put all of those functions and states inside of those hooks. And then all you have to do is, in that component, you'll just render the UI and call those hooks and use the functions that have all the logic already encapsulated inside of their hook definition. And in that case, you have a pretty well organized component. Even though it is a simple use case, I honestly feel like it's good to implement this best practices since the beginning, especially because it will make your code look a lot better, and it will force you to continue the standard as you improve and learn more of React. Now, like I said, this is technically my opinion, but it's not really my opinion because I learned it from other people, and it's a very commonly shared opinion. So I could call it a best practice because I want to, and I think you guys would benefit from using this as well. So this is basically it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting every week, and I would massively appreciate it. Again, thank you for watching the video. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any other best practices that you guys like to follow, or if you guys disagree with anything I said in the video. I like discussing online as well. Just let me know. So yeah, that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.